Frozen breath plumes from Calder's lips as he watches the Quinn's wagon carve a path through the untouched snow. Inside the cabin, Lydia cradles newborn Ella, unaware of the approaching figures, or that the silent woodsman outside carries a love for her as deep as the winter's chill. "It's a girl?" Thomas's voice echoes through the pines, the words a cruel twist of the knife Calder once took for her. Ed through the trees, shaking icicles loose from the eaves, and the chimney smoked a thin line into the endless gray. The world beyond the window was white and merciless. Inside it was not much warmer. Lydia Quinn lay near the hearth, her face flushed with pain, breath shallow. Her dress clung to her with sweat and blood, and her arms trembled where she clutched the threadbare quilt. Every contraction came like a wave to drown her. Her body, just 22 years old, already looked older. "Push, child. One more," the midwife urged. An old native woman with a face lined like river rock, her hands stained with herbs and smoke. She moved with practiced calm, though her voice betrayed urgency. Beside the door, Thomas Quinn stood with his back against the wall, coat collar turned up, hands buried in the pockets of his wolf fur jacket. He did not move toward his wife. He had not touched her since the labor began. His breath came out in visible puffs. His eyes were cold, narrowed. Lydia cried out, reaching a hand toward him. "Thomas, please, I need you." He said nothing. And then came the scream, the first thin cry of life splitting through the logs in the smoke. The baby emerged slick with blood, lungs raw with sound. The midwife caught her, wrapped her quickly, checked for breath, for fingers and toes. "A girl," she said, placing the bundle gently on Lydia's chest. "A winter princess." Lydia sobbed, not from pain now, but from joy, from relief so fierce it broke her. She kissed the baby's forehead and whispered, "She's perfect." Thomas stepped forward. He looked down at the child. Her eyes, startlingly blue, blinked up at him. She had his chin. Her hair was already dark and thick. He frowned. "It's a girl?" he asked flatly. Lydia's brow creased in confusion. "Yes, Thomas. She's healthy. She's yours." His jaw clenched. "I needed a son." She blinked, lips trembling. "What?" He turned for the door, fastening his coat. "I needed someone to carry the name. The land, not this." "She's your daughter," Lydia said, her voice rising in desperation. "You can still love her." He didn't look back. "I do not need a daughter," he said, "and I do not need you." He opened the door. The wind screamed in like a curse, pulling snow across the floorboards. Thomas, but he was already gone. His boots crunched into the snow, fading into white. Lydia screamed his name again, but the wind took it. Her body shook, not from labor now, but from something colder, deeper. The midwife stood still for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. Then she pulled her shawl tighter and began to gather her things. "Where are you going?" Lydia croaked. "I do not wish to cross the Quinns," the woman said. "You know what they do to those who interfere." Lydia wanted to protest, but her strength had gone. Her blood still stained the sheets. The midwife paused at the door, looking back once with something almost like pity in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, and vanished into the storm. The cabin was quiet again, save for the sound of wood popping in the fire and the sharp, unrelenting cries of the baby. Lydia pulled the child closer. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped her in the only thing left, an old wedding dress, now torn and stained, but still white. The wind howled. Snow piled against the windows. The wood groaned beneath its weight. Lydia pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead. "Ella," she whispered. "Your name is Ella." She rocked slowly, gently, singing a lullaby through cracked lips, but her voice faded. Her arms grew weak. The fire dwindled to embers, and the sound of the child's crying rose again, curling into the rafters like smoke. Outside, the wind carried it into the pines. One small cry beneath the storm. Cedar Falls Forest, the morning after the storm, still clung to the trees like old ghosts, heavy and quiet. The wind had settled, but the cold remained sharp enough to crack bark. Calder Rye trudged through the drifts, a bundle of half-frozen branches strapped to his back, boots sinking deep into the powder. His breath came in visible bursts, his eyes narrowed against the glare. The forest had always been his, silent, rough, but honest. He had not meant to pass by the old hunting cabin. He rarely did. But something tugged at him. Something strange. A sound, faint, weak. Not the howl of wolves, not the snapping of branches. A cry, a child. He dropped the wood and drew his rifle, steps cautious. He approached the door, which hung slightly open. One boot nudged it wide. Inside, the fire had died to coals. The air was bitter. On the floor, wrapped in a stained dress and rags, lay a woman, barely conscious. Her lips were blue. Her arms curled weakly around a tiny bundle that barely moved. Called her, stepped inside without a word. He moved fast but careful, hands steady. He added kindling to the hearth, stoked the coals, and breathed life into the flame. The baby whimpered, more frost than breath in her lungs. He removed his coat, heavy, fur-lined, and wrapped it around both mother and child. Then he poured warm water from his canteen into a tin cup, added a few drops from a leather pouch at his belt, thistle, birch bark, and dried wild rose. He lifted the woman's head, coaxed her lips open. "Drink," he said, "just once." She stirred, swallowed, called her, sat back on his heels, waited. The baby moved more now, cheeks flushed. Her cry was still soft, but it was steady, a good sound. He reached into his satchel, pulled a small carved toy from the bottom, a wooden rabbit he had made years ago. He placed it beside the child. A faint breath stirred. The woman's eyes fluttered open. She blinked against the firelight. Her body tensed. "Where?" Her voice cracked. Then her gaze landed on him. Recognition flickered. "Calder, Rye," she whispered. "You're Thomas's friend." Calder didn't answer at first. He only nodded once, then turned to add another log to the fire. Snow melted off his shoulders. Lydia tried to sit up but winced. "What are you doing here? I was gathering wood." "You saved us." He didn't respond. She looked down at her daughter, now warmer, sleeping beneath the wolf fur. Tears welled in her eyes. "He left us, just walked out." Calder didn't ask who. He already knew. Instead, he stood, moved to the shelf, and took down a small pot. He poured in water, set it on the fire, then turned to the cabinets. Beans, flour, jerky. He moved without noise, without fuss. Every action precise, intentional. Lydia watched him, dazed. "You live alone here?" He nodded. Wait, as he didn't look up. "Better that way." The cabin slowly filled with warmth again. The wind outside had stopped. Lydia leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Her body still ached, her heart worse. But the baby slept peacefully now, safe in the arms of a stranger who had not spoken more than 10 words. Calder set a tin bowl of broth beside her. "You need to eat," he said. She looked up at him. He met her eyes for the first time. There was something ancient in them, worn, but steady and not unkind. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a small nod, then turned to split the frozen logs by the hearth behind him. The baby stirred. Her fingers curled around the wooden rabbit, and for the first time in hours, Lydia Quinn did not feel alone. The fire cracked low. Outside, the world remained silent, buried in white. Inside, the baby slept, curled against Lydia's chest, her breath soft, steady. Lydia sat on the edge of the bed, a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. Calder was sharpening his hatchet by the fire, the rhythmic motion slow, patient. "I never wanted this," Lydia said quietly. Calder didn't look up. "I mean, the marriage, the name, the lie of it." He paused, then resumed sharpening. "I was 17 when Thomas started showing interest. My mother warned me, but he knew how to say the right things. Promised me love, escape, a house of my own. I thought that meant freedom." Bitter laugh escaped her lips. "When I told him I was pregnant, he turned pale, said he needed time. Then his family stepped in. Suddenly there was a wedding. No one asked me what I wanted. They just bought a dress and told me to smile." Calder set the hatchet down. He didn't speak. Lydia glanced down at Ella. "They made it seem like it was all my fault that I had trapped their golden boy. They never said it aloud, but I heard the whispers. I saw the way they looked at me during the ceremony." Calder finally looked over. His gaze was steady, unreadable. "You were always too kind," he said. Lydia met his eyes. You knew me, didn't you, from before? He nodded once. You were 15. You stopped those boys from hurting the Navajo kid by the well. You stood between them and got a black eye for it. She blinked. You remember that? I was there, he said, watching. I think I remember you. You had a chipped tooth back then. Always carried a fishing pole even when it was snowing. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. Barely. I used to think you hated people, Lydia said. I didn't hate them. I just didn't think they were worth talking to. She hesitated. Did you hate me? He shook his head slowly. No. Silence stretched between them. Not empty, just full of things too fragile to name. I used to wonder about you, she said. Where you went after school ended. You disappeared. Went to the mountains. Started trapping, cutting timber. Left the rest behind. Lydia traced her finger along the baby's cheek. Thomas said you were dangerous, that you lived like a wild man. Calder's voice was calm. Thomas said a lot of things. Did you ever love him? He asked. She didn't answer right away. I think I loved who he pretended to be. The way he smiled at me in church. The way he made me feel like I mattered. Her voice broke a little, but it wasn't real. He loved himself too much to love anyone else. Calder's hands tightened around the handle of the hatchet, then released. Lydia looked at him carefully. And you? Did you ever? He didn't finish the sentence, but she knew. I think I always felt something, she whispered, but I didn't let myself look too closely. You were quiet. Thomas was loud. I was young and loud was easier to hear. Calder stood, walked to the shelf, poured 2 cups of warm broth, handed one to her. Her air fingers brushed. Rena easily nodded. Neither pulled away. She sipped. You don't have to say anything, Lydia said. I know you're not a man of words. He looked at her. Then quietly he said, You were the first person who ever looked at me like I was worth something. Lydia felt her breath catch. Outside, the wind whispered through the eaves. Inside, a baby dreamed in warmth. A woman remembered who she had been, and a man who had spent his life alone let the silence say what his mouth could not. The snow had stopped falling, but the cold lingered like a question unanswered. Inside the cabin, warmth had returned bit by bit. The fire crackled strong now. A stew simmered gently on the stove, and blankets hung near the hearth, drying from the storm. Calder knelt near the makeshift crib, gently adjusting the folds of a wool cloth tucked around a baby. She stirred but did not cry. Her tiny fist peeked from the swaddle, one of them curling instinctively around Calder's thick, calloused finger. Lydia watched from the rocker, her hands resting over her belly, hollow now, but still aching, her lips parted, not in pain, just awe. I have never seen a man hold anything like that, she said softly, as if she were glass. Calder glanced up but said nothing. I thought Thomas would be the kind of father who'd kneel like that, she continued, but he could barely touch me even when I was carrying her. Calder lifted the baby's hand, inspected her fingernails. So pale, so small, and gently tucked her fist back under the blanket. I spent my first weekend at the button. Lydia's throat tightened. I named her, she said after a pause. Ella, he turned to look at her. It means little light? That is what she was. Even when I wanted to stop breathing, she cried. That cry kept me from slipping away. It is a fierce thing, that cry. It is life itself. Calder nodded slowly. Then he reached for his satchel and pulled out a small block of cedar wood. From a drawer, he took a carving knife worn smooth at the handle and began etching. Each letter was deliberate. His movements were quiet, methodical, but reverent as if the name itself carried weight. When he finished, he hung the plaque at the head of the crib. 4 letters, deep and bold. Ella. Lydia pressed a hand to her lips. You did not have to do that. I wanted to, he said. Night deepened. The wind outside had calmed, but stars blinked cold and sharp through the window panes. Calder stayed up beside the hearth, adding wood, checking the shutters, keeping the room safe and warm. Lydia sat near him, legs curled beneath her, wrapped in the coat he had lent her. Why are you doing this? She asked, voice low. He stirred the fire absently. Because she needs it. Lydia tilted her head. That is not the whole reason. He hesitated, then reached for the kettle. Would it scare you, he said finally, if I said I cared for her the moment I saw her? Lydia's eyes shimmered. No, she looks nothing like me, Calder said. But she feels right in my arms, like I have held her in a dream I never remembered until now. Lydia looked at him for a long moment. Then she whispered, You do not have to stay up all night. I am used to it, Calder said. The forest does not sleep. Neither do I. She shifted closer. You did not answer me earlier. Why are you really doing this? He stared into the fire. Then without turning, he said, Because I do not leave behind what I once cared about. Lydia felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain, something softer, more dangerous. He looked at her, then really looked, his eyes full of things that had gone unsaid for years, things that needed no explanation now. Lydia reached for his hand, not to ask, not to plead, just to feel that it was real behind them. Ella stirred in her sleep, and for the first time since the snow began, the world felt warm. The silence of Cedar Falls broke with the sound of hooves crunching over ice. Lydia saw them first. Two riders weaving through the frosted pines, their coats too fine, too clean for these parts. Their horses stepped lightly as if unused to rough terrain. A third figure followed behind in a wagon, seated high, posture rigid even from a distance. She recognized it instantly. That spine of steel, that chin angled too high, as though the world owed him its silence. Thomas Quinn had found them. Calder was behind the cabin, axe swinging steady, his breath misting in the cold. The thud of blade into wood echoed like a drum beat against the mountain's hush. They're here, Lydia said, breathless, eyes wide with something between fear and exhaustion. He did not ask who. He didn't need to. He wiped his hands on the inside of his coat, set the axe down carefully against the chopping block, and turned toward the open clearing. By the time the wagon creaked to a stop before the cabin, Calder was already waiting, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes dark and steady beneath the brim of his hat. Thomas dismounted first, flicking snow from his gloves with a distaste that made Lydia's stomach turn. Well, he drawled, surveying the cabin with a curled lip. Didn't think you'd survive this long up here, let alone with company. Lydia stepped up beside Calder, arms folded across her chest, her voice low and controlled. You came all this way. What for? Thomas's smile did not reach his eyes. Your mother came crying to my father, said you disappeared with the baby. My father says scandal does not go well with Christmas carols. I didn't disappear, Lydia replied. You walked out. Thomas waved a hand in the air, dismissive. I don't care what you told this mountain ghost. I'm not here for stories. He pulled a folder from inside his coat and tossed it into the snow with a soft thud. Sign it. You waive all claims. Property, family name, inheritance. The baby gets nothing. Clean break. Lydia blinked, the cold suddenly biting deeper. You came here to erase her. Thomas's face hardened. The name Quinn carries weight. She doesn't deserve it. Neither do you. Calder stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Just one step. But it was enough. Thomas's eyes darted to him, and for the first time faltered. If you want to get to her, Calder said, voice like iron in winter, you go through me. Silence fell thick and cold. The two riders behind Thomas shifted in their saddles. Hands hovered near their belts, but Calder didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't reach for the rifle slung across his back. He just stood still as the trees around him, unmoving, immovable. Thomas sneered, voice low and venomous. You always had a thing for her, didn't you? Back when you were scrubbing stables, is that what this is? Playing house with my leftovers? Still, Calder said nothing. His eyes never left. Thomas. Thomas turned to Lydia. You're the mother of my child. That doesn't mean I owe you anything. Then he mounted his horse, pulling the reins hard. The wagon creaked into motion. No one looked back. Within moments, the snow began swallowing their tracks, as if they had never been there at all. Lydia stood frozen. Then slowly her knees gave. She sank onto the steps of the cabin, hands trembling in her lap. Calder crouched beside her, Ear won't come back, he said. She looked at him, voice barely above a whisper. You didn't lift a hand. I didn't need to. She reached for the folder, still lying limp in the snow. Fingers clenched. She tore it in half, then again. And again until the wind scattered its remnants across the white. From inside the cabin, Ella stirred, letting out a soft sigh in her sleep, blissfully unaware. Her name, her future, had just been severed from rot. Not by violence, not by blood, but by a man who protected what mattered and didn't need to shout to be heard. The snow did not let up, but the cabin grew warmer. Not because of firewood, though Calder taught Lydia how to split pine without bruising her hands, but because something had shifted. They spoke more now, not always in words. Sometimes in the way Calder passed her the sharper knife, or the way Lydia stirred the stew the way he liked. Lai learned how to move through snow without sinking, how to track rabbit prints, how to tie knots with frozen fingers. Calder showed her which berries stained your tongue and which ones stopped your heart. She listened closely, always, even when her fingers ached and her pride stung. One morning she knelt beside the fire attempting to gut a hair. Her blade trembled slightly. You'll ruin the meat, Calder said behind her. I'm trying. You're trying wrong. He took her hand gently, adjusted the angle of the knife, his calloused fingers warm against hers. Slice here, he murmured. The rabbit came apart clean. Lydia blinked. Calder stepped back without a word, leaving behind a strange quiet in her chest. Later that week, he brought her to the stream, half frozen, glinting under moonlight. They built a fire from dry moss and pine needles. The air smelled of pine sap and ash. Lydia watched the flames dance. Her breath clouded before her. She looked up. My father was hanged in the square. Calder didn't move, but his jaw tightened. They said he was poisoning the town. All he did was teach the Navajo children to read letters, numbers, nothing dangerous. But they didn't like that. Silence stretched. The fire popped. I was 12. They burned our house. My mother packed what she could and sent me away. Calder stirred the fire with a stick. My mother died screaming, he said. The ranchers wanted our land. They beat my father until he couldn't speak. He hasn't made a sound since. Lydia turned her face to the flames, trying to hold back tears. Calder did not offer comfort. He simply stayed. And somehow that was more than enough. That night they did not return to the cabin. They slept near the fire, backs against the same log, not touching, not talking, but sharing the same breath, the same warmth. Lydia woke once to find Calder watching the trees rifle across his knees. Eyes sharp, she whispered. You don't sleep much? I sleep enough. Are you always like this? He didn't answer then quietly. Only when there's something worth protecting. Livia turned over, heart unsteady. The next morning she caught him holding Ella with one arm, bottle in the other, humming low under his breath. A song she didn't recognize. Where did you learn that? She liked it, he said simply. The days passed. The snow softened. Calder began carving a cradle from pine scraps. Lydia mended torn shirts and lined boots with rabbit fur. Ella gurgled more often now, warm and bright-eyed, nestled close to whoever held her. One evening, the firelight flickered across their faces as they sat beside Ella's cradle. Lydia reached to adjust a log. Lydia's hand moved too. Their fingers touched. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. She looked at him fully, then at the lines in his face, the burned scar on his jaw, the softness he tried to hide. I never thought I'd feel safe again, she whispered. He didn't reply, just looked back, unblinking. She placed her hand atop his, slow and certain. No vows, no declarations. Just the quiet acceptance that some love begins not with thunder, but with silence that holds. The wind howled differently that morning, sharper, faster, carrying with it the scent of something unnatural. Calder Rye stood at the edge of the tree-line, eyes narrowed. He had seen the tracks before sunrise. 6 horses, heavy boots, and a wagon parked too close to the old lumber road. He knew what that meant. Back in the cabin, Lydia was rocking Ella, the baby bundled in wool and sleeping peacefully. Calder stepped inside, snow clinging to his coat. They're coming, he said simply. Lydia's eyes widened. Who? Your husband's family or what they sent in his name? He didn't wait for panic, just handed her the small rifle they had practiced with, the one she could hold steady now. Then he bent to the floorboards, pulled up a trap door, and began pulling out supplies, rope, spikes, a coil of iron wire. I set traps down the western slope, he said. They won't reach the cabin before losing one or two, and if they get past that, Calder looked at her. Then I stopped them here. Lydia swallowed hard. This is my fight too. He gave her a long, unreadable look, then nodded once. By noon the air was thick with tension. The snow had stilled. Even the birds had gone silent. They came just as Calder predicted. 6 men on horseback led by a bounty hunter named Myrto, a cruel-eyed man with a voice like gravel and a contract signed in the name of the Quinn family. He dismounted, drew out the parchment, and shouted up toward the cabin. By order of the Quinn estate, the woman known as Lydia Quinn is to be returned to claim legal custody of property and bloodline. Inside, Lydia clenched her jaw. They think I'm coming for the land. You're not, Calder said. You're defending your daughter. She nodded. Then let's defend her. The first trap snapped shut like a bear's jaw. One of the hired guns screaming as iron teeth crushed his leg. Another fell into a hidden pit, cracking ribs on sharpened stakes. The others fired blindly, charging the edge of the clearing. Alder moved like part of the forest, appearing and vanishing between trunks. His rifle cracked once, twice. A man fell from his horse, then another. Mert cursed, ducking behind a rock, and shouted, You can't protect her forever. The law's behind me. Sarah crouched low. No, just money. Gunfire erupted. Bark flew from the trees. Calder rolled to the side, took a glancing shot to the arm, but didn't slow down. He picked them off one by one until only Myrto remained. Calder walked toward him, bleeding but steady. You have 2 choices, he said, voice low. Ride back and tell them she's under protection, or don't ride back at all. Mert looked at the rifle aimed at his heart. He raised both hands, dropped his pistol, and limped back to his horse. I'll tell them, he spat, but they won't forget this. I hope not, Calder said. When the snow cleared that week, word had spread faster than any bullet. People came from the town, curious, hesitant. They had heard of the standoff. They wanted gossip. They wanted blood. But what they saw was not what they expected. Lydia stood tall at the cabin's porch, Ella in her arms. No shame, no fear. Thomas rode in last, his coat fine, his boots clean. He dismounted with a practiced smile and faced the crowd. I have no quarrel with the woman, he said loudly. I only came to settle things. Lydia didn't move. Thomas looked at Calder, then at the baby, then cleared his throat. I formally renounce all paternal rights, he announced. The child is not part of the Quinn inheritance. That is all. Whispers ran through the crowd. Lydia stepped forward. You never cared about this child, but she will know love. She will know family, just not your name. Thomas mounted again, red-faced, and rode off without a word. Silence followed. Then Calder walked to Lydia's side, took Ella in his arms. The baby blinked up at him, calm in the hush of winter. Someone asked from the back, unsure. Is she yours now? Calder looked at the people gathered. Yes, he said. His voice did not rise, but it carried. She's mine. He looked at Lydia. Both our snow fell soft around them, and for the first time, no one questioned it. Spring arrived quietly at Cedar Falls. The snow melted slow and shy, retreating into the creeks, revealing green beneath white. Like a breath held all winter, finally exhaled. Birds returned to the trees. The wind lost its bite, and with it a new rhythm settled into the land. Lydia stayed. There had been offers some kind, some laced with shame, from dust well to return, to teach, to reconcile. She turned them all down. I do not want to be tolerated, she told Dare one evening. I want to be free. And she was. Each morning she walked the trails barefoot, carrying Ella on her hip, teaching her the names of trees and herbs, teaching her to read the shapes of clouds. She began to teach again, this time not in schoolhouses, but under the pines, where the children of hunters and shepherds came to sit on logs and listen to her voice, paint stories in the air. Calder built them a new cabin, It rose beside the old one, made of clean pine and patience. He carved the windowsills himself, etched small wildflowers into the beams above the hearth. At night they sat together by the fire. Lydia would hum lullabies from her childhood while Ella babbled in her lap, her tiny fingers reaching for the flames she could not touch. And one evening, as the fire flickered low and the shadows danced gently on the floor, Ella said it. Papa Calder froze. Lydia looked up from her stitching, tears already welling. Calder turned slowly, met the child's gaze. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Ella giggled, reached again. Woof. He reached for her, held her close, and closed his eyes. That night, Lydia pulled out the small, leather-bound ledger she had kept sealed since the day Ella was born. Inside was a blank page, waiting for a name. By candlelight, she wrote with careful ink. Ella, not Quinn, not discarded, not forgotten, a name of new roots. She passed the book to Calder without a word. He looked at it, then back at her. "I did not give her my name," he said softly. "I gave her back what should have always been hers." Lydia leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, the pines swayed like lullabies. The creek whispered between stones. From afar, they might have looked like any family, man, woman, child beneath a warm roof. But up close, their love was stitched with stronger thread, survival, respect, and something deeper than either had dared to speak aloud. They never signed papers. There was no preacher, no bells, no bouquet, just Ella's laugh, just Lydia's quiet smile as she watched Calder build her a table that would last through winters, just the cabin light glowing soft through trees. And as the camera pulls back, rising above Cedar Falls, above the young green of thawing woods, above the chimney smoke curling into a sky reborn, there beneath the new sun, three souls sat in the cradle of earth in silence. Not because the world had given them peace, but because they had made it together. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the snow, heard the silence, or saw a piece of your own heart in Lydia, Calder, or little Ella, then don't let it end here. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who still believes in second chances, and subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales where love rises from dust, danger, and the coldest of nights. Because out here on the frontier, hearts don't just survive. They fight, they heal, and sometimes they find home. See you on the next ride.